Peace and blessings, and welcome back to my channel, Namat's Reflections. Today we are going to be discussing obedience in reference to leadership, which is the sheep nature and where we see it today. So to quickly recap from episode 1, we stated that this nature is found in the head down consumer, right, with herd mentality, who behave as they are directed without counteraction or aggression. So if you just have a photo of a sheep in your mind, someone who is, in terms of human character, head down, consuming without aggression. Again, this is a good thing and it can be a terrible thing. So one of the things that we're going to talk about in reference to following leadership, people with this nature and following leadership. One thing about this particular animal is that it is not an animal of burden, right? So if you look at the human character or human characteristic similar to this isn't a person that can handle a lot. This isn't a person that can carry any form of heavy load. And it's very ironic that this is also the case in the physical sheep itself. This means someone else has to take on the burden for people who are like this, right? And that's not always a bad thing. So I don't want you to think that the sheep nature is a bad thing. It's actually a wonderful nature. But when in the wrong leadership, yeah, it could be pretty terrible. But someone else has to take on the nature, has to take on the burden for someone with this nature, because primarily they lack knowledge, right? And when you lack knowledge, because you're consuming all the time, you're not focused on education, you're not focusing on anything higher, and consumption is your primary way of life, you don't have much of a choice but to be ignorant in a lot of ways, in a lot of areas in your life, and it makes you subjective. It makes you live a subjective life where someone else is constantly leading you. But one example of this, a natural example, is a child, right? So if children knew what we knew, they probably wouldn't listen to us, right? So today, pretty much they know a lot. I mean, they have the internet, okay? So, they're going to ask social media and Google a lot of times before they come to the parent and ask anything, right? And there goes your job. There goes your primary job as a parent. So you're fired, in essence, unable to teach your child because you don't know how to reach them. And you don't know what to do. So one of the reasons I decided to put out information in this style and to teach the way that I teach is to create a way to inform people from a standpoint that would stimulate their thinking and show how much we are tied into the design of things. And it humbles you. It humbles you when you realize, hey, I might be a human being, but I'm not that far beyond this creation. Matter of fact, I'm so similar to this creation that my destiny and my fate are tied to it in so many ways, right? So share these videos, share and discuss them with your family, maybe Fridays or Saturdays, Sundays. Some people use those days for prayer or for church or for talim. Make it a discussion, let them answer or ask the questions first, right? But we've lost many of them in terms of teaching, in terms of having them come to us for knowledge in general, and certainly in terms of establishing any form of relationship with their creator. So imagine the mindset and the behavior of a person who craves obedience, right? Children crave obedience. So imagine the mindset and the behavior of a person that craves obedience and leadership, but is left without spiritual guidance, right? Imagine that mindset. And, as a mother, as moms, as the women that are watching this, we are the first teacher. And I like to kind of say that the leaders of the internal order. That's how I like to express being a woman a lot of times. We have a chance to reach them when they are intact with their obedient nature. When a child is intact with their obedient nature, we have this grand opportunity, right? They're willing and ready to follow. Who do you want to be your competition is going to be the question. Like, who, as a mom, you have to ask yourself this question. If you want to do your job, who do you want to be the competition when you introduce them to information? And are you able to compete, right? If not, then you've lost your value. You've lost your value. When you can't tell your child anything because they're learning it already from somewhere else, and the things you do tell them don't hold value or don't matter or just can't compete, well, what are you going to do? So how much authority and respect do we deserve if we're not their source for guidance? Something to truly sit down and just think about. And what has guidance become? What level of guidance are we giving them? Clean your room, eat dinner. Did you do your homework? But meanwhile, they're learning what type of person to become from social media or from somewhere else or someone else, right? They want to know and they're searching. So how are we going to position ourselves? We got this little window. How are we going to position ourselves to be able to do that, to be able to compete? Now, the window is getting smaller and smaller. At what age do we lose this window, this ability to influence them, where they are naturally just obedient and they're looking up to you and all that? You're so grand in their eyes. We used to be obedient, or at least had a decent level, even if it was forced, or even if we had to pretend. We were, at least until you were 18, because there were consequences. All right. Now, literally, 4 and 5 years old, really, I have a story. So I'm a business owner. I'm at the salon. I own salons. I've been doing that a lot of my life. And there's this little boy. His mom keeps saying, he's around 4 years old. Mom keeps saying, sit down, sit down, sit down. Please sit down. I asked you to sit down. Blah, blah, blah. Keep going. She just keeps doing it. And this little boy is headed for the door, and she's constantly sit down. So eventually, and she's sitting in a chair getting her hair done. Eventually, the boy runs out. There's a highway, all right? The boy runs out into the street. She dives out of the chair, goes and tries to save him, takes him in the bathroom, wears his tail out like, just beats the little boy, brings him out, now he's sitting down. So as you can imagine, the order of operation here was completely backwards. So what was she supposed to do? I'm going to just throw these questions out there. Should the little boy have gotten a love tap before he ran out of the door? Is that considered abuse? These are some things we got to think about here as leaders and as parents. Is that abuse? If you're asking a child to constantly sit down and they don't, and they're getting ready to be put in a dangerous situation. A love tap, is that bad today? I don't know what people are thinking. But judge for yourself. You can't tie him down to the chair, right? I mean, that would be horrible. That's really not an option. Do you cancel your appointment and leave because you can't control what your child is doing? But this is all due to what happened before he ever got there. How the child is being raised has a lot to do with this. So yes, obviously there are exceptions to the rule. We know that. We have kids that have, attention issues and things like that. But a lot of times that's not it. A lot of times you've lost control. The child is only 4 or 5. You've already lost control. What do you think a future of parenting is going to look like? So, this, being loving love is very important. But, I really think we've lost the definition of love, not just with our children, but in relationships and so many other things. We have lost our minds when it comes to defining what love is. But hugs, kisses, a bunch of gifts and possessions and stuff like that to a person that's curious and searching for guidance, and that's your replacement, that is a recipe for disaster. And you're really teaching them who to be in the future and what to do in the future and how to prioritize as an adult. Right? So, I mean, as women, we really need to remember that we've been given a connection with our children that allows us to reach them and mold them and shape them on the insides. And we have to take advantage of that opportunity while we have it, while we can. And it's a lot more to it than love. We've got to become educated about what they're being exposed to and try our best to counteract. And I call it debriefing. You know, I have a child that I'm raising at this time in my life, and I debrief her on everything. She knows a little bit about everything, and whatever's out here in the world, I know what's going on. I look for it because I'm expecting that she's going to see it, and I'll debrief her. I'll give her the perspective. She's still at a place where she's open to listening, so I'm taking advantage of it, right? At least sit down and debrief them and try to pick their brains. Okay, look for what's going on out there that they may be exposed to, and try to explain it with some sense, so that they're not coming up with their own ideas or listening to people that have these ridiculous ideas about what they're supposed to be doing with their life. Because there goes your child. Somebody needs to be primarily responsible to make sure that these children are being cared for properly and protected, and intellectually stimulated in a good way, right? Yes, I always go back to this because, you know, people get into this role identity crisis and they can't seem to figure out, okay, well, who's supposed to be doing what? Just have a conversation about it. If you're not good at it, maybe your husband can do it, but somebody needs to be responsible for it. You know, as a mother and as a woman, I know what our capacity is, and I know that this is an innate job. It's a natural thing for us to do. So I'm going to bring up the woman a lot when I talk about that. But, you know, I don't know, maybe many of us think that giving birth to them is enough, and that should, that deserves obedience and respect. It does, but it's definitely not enough, you know, and maybe some of that has to do with the way we were raised, you know, combined with the environment that we were raised in at that time. That stuff worked then, you know, I gave birth to you and all that, so you need to listen to me, but it doesn't work now. You know, this is the age of information. There's a battle in the sky, right? The airways, as we call it, now known as the internet, also known as the intellect. There's a battle going on, and we need to get in front of it as parents, or just forget about your kids because they don't belong to you anymore, right? They belong to society. But back to this burden thing, you know, sheep are not being animals of burden, and people who have a dominant sheep nature have a very difficult time carrying burdens. So, you know, when something happens to these kids, it puts both them and us in harm's way, right? So where in nature do you see offspring being disobedient? Where in nature, and these are questions that I'm just saying we should ask, where in nature do we see mothers allowing everybody to raise their children, allowing everybody else, right, everyone else to raise their children? Where in nature do you see fathers taking over the internal order of the family, right, and not allowing a mother to do her job, you know, or not promoting the idea that a mother should be responsible for the spiritual guidance and for the care of their children. You know, where in nature do you see this? And if you do see it, because maybe you see it somewhere, what is the environment that it's happening in? What are the influences that's causing this to be this way? You know, but my point is that it's not natural, right? This thing that's happening with the family and parenting is not natural. It's not okay. It's not natural, right? We're trying to make it natural. And unfortunately, it's going to become natural if we keep avoiding it. It's going to become natural, and you're just going to have a natural breakup of the family. It's already happening. And, you know, we're acting like it's natural for kids to be disrespectful and disobedient to the point where everything you watch has some disrespectful child cursing their parents out, or storming out of the room, or running out of the house, or shut up, mom. Like, I'm serious. I'm just sitting there watching like, Sometimes my husband and I would be watching stuff and I'd be like, did you hear what she just said? Like, can you imagine what would happen? Like, it's not happening. It's not going to happen here. So it's sad though, because you're seeing this in cartoons, you're seeing it in movies, you're seeing this disrespectful behavior all over the place in terms of children and how they're responding to adults or people that should be in authority, the leadership. It's something. That's all I'm saying. But let's get back to it. So remember, the sheep nature is one based on head down consumption, right? So I want to make sure we stay on track here. So we see that when we look at our children, right? We see them on the device, almost every time you look at them. This is it right here, this head down consumption. But we also see it with ourselves. When we look at our own selves, we see it, right? So how are you helping them when you're doing the same thing that they're doing? Here's another thing. The child becomes 18 and 19. We're here celebrating that they can take their first drink. We're celebrating that. That something should sound wrong. This is the same child that's bringing you D's and E's, and you're celebrating that they can go do adult things. No, I don't know. I just think it sounds ridiculous to me, but this is really what we're doing. It's time for them to leave the house. They're underdeveloped, and it's like sending fetuses out into the world. When should we be sending this? When should we be sending them out? When should we be sending our children out? We have to start thinking new now. Times have changed, and we're holding on to old stuff. Who cares about 18? Who cares about being 21, right? You're not acting anything like you know anything about responsibility, yet I'm going to celebrate giving you more responsibility. So what do you think is going to happen to that child? You're expecting a child to take on this world, look around, you're expecting them to take on this world without spiritual guidance, and we haven't done our part in their development. So what do you think is going to happen to them? This isn't something that's taught in school. This is why I've decided to start teaching it. We were used to have these religious communities, but the information got buried and people started doing whatever they wanted to with religious information. So we don't have that anymore. But formal education is not enough for them to survive today. Formal education is not enough for children to survive today. It's not enough. There's a mental health crisis. And as parents, we're going to have to get in early. If you're not a doctor and you don't know how to deal with mental health, you need to be thinking about getting in early with your children, like really influencing them very, very early. But back to my point, allowing an undeveloped person access to the wrong information and drugs. This is undeveloped person. I'm going to give you access to the wrong information. Here's all the information that you could ever think of or not think of. Here's access to every drug. Here's some weed. Here's, take this. I know that you're undeveloped. I know you're having mental health issues. I know that you're depressed. But let's celebrate that you're leaving the house. You're placing a burden on them. You're celebrating placing a burden on them that they cannot handle. And this is a real setback. This is a real setback for family life. It has to be taken more seriously. Where else do we see examples of placing a burden on people that are undeveloped people, right? Reparations. So right now there's a lot of talk about reparations. I believe in the state of California, they're talking about the opportunity to give out reparations. Now, I'm not against reparations at all. I think that there are definitely reparations due. But what would happen if everybody was given $250,000 or if everyone is given this boatload of cash? Seriously, could we carry it? Shouldn't there be some sort of criteria for leadership and development before someone hands you something like that. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense right now. It seems like there needs to be a circumstance and a situation that exists where these reparations actually hold value and can continue into generation after generation. We don't have that going on right now. Another example, it's kind of like I'm a business owner. Am I going to give my business to my child who is showing that they're irresponsible or showing that they can't handle it? No, I would never do that. I would never do that. So, how are we not clear on, when someone should be given responsibility and a burden or a load and be successful at carrying it? How are we confused when we know we wouldn't do that ourselves, right? But on another note, this is on another note, when thinking about obedience and the obedient nature, I had to really think about, okay, well, why is it that this word has become so terrible? And a lot of it has to do with feeling like it's not safe. It's not safe to be obedient. It's not safe because the leadership, who's leading, who's giving us the information that's causing us to be in the crisis that we are mentally, physically, and in our lives, And so, yeah, it's scary to use the word obedience a lot of times, but we have to bring it back. We have to be able to make sure that it's protected. Bring it back, but make sure that it's protected, But while thinking about this, I had to think about it. It made me think about the human body. I was trying to think about, okay, well, what is the most obedient creation that I can think of? And the thing that entered my mind was the human body. No matter what we do to it, continuously trying to, harm it, all the crazy stuff we do to this body, it's continuously trying to heal itself so that it can return to the way that it was created by its creator. No matter what we do to it, it's constantly trying to get back to its natural self. The body does it all by itself by healing, right? And I mean, talk about obedience, right? Talk about obedience to God. My goodness. It keeps trying to burn all this fat off that you keep putting on it, right? It keeps trying to get rid of toxins and alcohol when you put in it and the terrible foods that we give it. I mean, it does everything we ask it to do. And it even tells us when we're doing too much until it finally gives out from exhaustion. The person could have been a hot mess, and the body is just like, I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying to be obedient to my purpose. I'm going to find a way to listen to this person that's telling me what to do and maintain my obedience. I think if we examine that, maybe we could figure out how to maintain our obedience in an environment that's constantly attacking us. Man, it's something to think about, and even when we have a funeral and, the person in the body might have been an awful person, I mean, we stand up there for an hour and a half or 2 hours and talk about and try to find every good thing about this person who was a terrible person. But really, the body was obedient, and this is the reason we stand for the body. When they bring the body out, we should all stand up because the body was obedient. There's something to say about this human body. The body in its obedience it's just something, and how it just keeps trying. It makes me want to take better care of my body. When I start thinking in detail like that about how great the body is, it makes you want to apologize to your body, but I just wanted to bring that up because it's something that I thought about that just, you have those aha moments where you're like, wow, that is just amazing. That was one of them for me. But okay, so getting back to the sheep and the obedient nature, there's this photograph. And in this photograph that's so very popular, we see it a lot in religion. We see this shepherd and we see this sheep. And this is really the symbol of all relationships where there's a leader and a loyal following, right? Again, this can be the best thing that ever happened to mankind in community life or the worst thing that could happen, right? Like, just the worst thing. So who should this person be, right? We have this obedient nature that we want to bring out of ourselves so that we can be decent human beings. Who should this person be, right? This should be someone that can sustain you, someone that can protect you, and in the best case, evolve you, right? Intellectually and materially, both, right? That's what you would be looking for. In the religious space, there's a saying that the shepherd or the messenger with the staff can bring down leaves for the sheep, meaning they can have food from a higher source that could cause them or will cause them to lift their head from consumption in order to attain something higher. So that's just to give you an idea of what kind of leadership we should be looking for. But what are our three choices in terms of leadership? Number one is following the group. Everyone wants, Louis Vuitton. Everybody wants a Lexus or whatever the majority is doing, following the group. That's one form of leadership, and that's probably the major form of leadership today, following the group. Number two, following the person, following the individual, right? What do you call it? Idiosyncrasies of the person, right? So one example of this is in Islam, there's Muhammad, right? We have people that follow the person Muhammad, and they don't have the spiritual knowledge of Muhammad, but they follow the person, which means they become ritualistic, doing the movements and body language and even trying to look like him. But there's another form of leadership, is following an actual person, and that leads to idol worship, right, as we call it, and ritualism. The third form of leadership is following the logic, to actually follow logic. Logic can come from anywhere. It can come from a person, it can come from society, or it can come from anywhere, right? It can come from inspiration. But those are the three types. The minority of us follow the logic, right? There's something, I don't know if there's something boring about following the logic, but that is what we should be doing. Okay, so just think about your situation. If you had to list down where you get your information from, who you're trying to be like, what you understand to be guidance, where would you fall in terms of following leadership? Who would you be following? Something to consider, something to think about. Now, what happens when we have an individual that stands up in discernment and can elevate and sustain us? What actually happens when someone like that comes along? Typically, when someone like this comes along, they sound different, right? Someone serious comes along. They sound different and they're serious, right? So what happens is that we don't want to be taken away from the herd. This is what we do, right? We claim we want to be better people. We claim we want this, United States, and we want these great communities. But when someone serious comes along, right, with information trying to help you, you don't want to be torn away from the herd, right? You don't want to have to do something different from the group. This is sheep mentality. This is what sheep do, right? They want to be with the herd. They have to be with the herd. They're going to follow the herd, right? It would make you unpopular. It would make you corny, I guess, maybe even lonely. That's literally what we do when someone comes along. They seem weird. They seem awkward. I know for me, the way that I teach, it's unusual to a lot of people. I'm at the point in my life where I don't care. I don't care much about what people think about me. So I don't care if I'm weird to you or whatever the case may be. I just don't care. So it doesn't bother me. But I think it bothers most people, and that's why, again, we don't have a lot of original people walking around today. But look at the buffoonery that people have to display to get a following these days, right? You can't come serious. You got to be singing and dancing and doing all of this stuff. But the one that comes with the knowledge, if you're not playful enough, cracking enough jokes or whatever, then that's it. You don't get seen. That's the society that we're living in, and there's something scary about that. And who knows? Maybe it's a barrier. Maybe that God just made it this way so that only the honest people that are serious get the serious information, right? That leaves a lot of people out. But in essence, we know what's going on. We've been traumatized. We don't trust anyone. These are the reasons we don't want to follow any leadership anymore. This is just not normal. It's not normal. And we're really going to have to get serious about information, where we get it from, what makes sense, right? And how we're distributing it. We're going to have to get serious. And yeah, I mean, obviously when there's trauma and things like that have happened, some may say, you need a psychiatrist or a mental health provider or something. Look, if that's what we got to do to get serious, then let's just go ahead and do it, right? We have to move forward somehow. But this movement to get rid of leadership, it's being done so cleverly, while we're just completely distracted, while we have these mental health conditions and all of that. Our families are being destroyed, communities are being destroyed, individuals are being destroyed, and it's being done so cleverly that you don't even realize it's happened until it's already happened. And then I think we forget that we're tied to each other. You can't be in your cozy house or in your individual situation and think that, you're not going to be affected or you're not going to affect others. The universal reality just doesn't respond that way. But where is this idea of ridding the leadership come from that we can see clearly? A lot of it has to do with the excuses, that we make. So some of these excuses, blaming the white man, we're still doing that. I'm over that. I am so I'm so done with hearing about that. I understand white supremacy is real. I'm not saying that we need to just pretend like nothing's happening, but these conversations should be about self-leadership. That's what they should be way more about self-leadership and doing what we need to do than blaming the white man. I'm just done with hearing about it. Another excuse, the patriarchy, male chauvinism and toxic masculinity. And, this is all blaming someone besides yourself. The new one, the matriarchy, the female chauvinism, femininity rise, taking over the world. This is really it. These are really excuses, actually. Everyone's putting the blame on everyone else. When are we going to get to focus on ourselves? Okay. And it takes accountability, self-accountability. What have you done to contribute to the problem? How can you fix that? I don't know, right? It's something that, it's going to take some humbling, some real humbling for us to get to a place where we can say, hey, you know what? I'm to blame. I am to blame. What have I done? Let me make a list of everything I've said and done to contribute to all the problems that we have. And then focusing in on that. That could be, I think that's the solution. I think if we can get people to do that, but that's, that maybe that's the difficult thing. I don't know. Maybe our mental health disorders are making this intangible. I'm not sure. But I think a lot of this has to do with what I call the flattening of the land. Okay, this is an idea and a term that seems very clear to me. It seems very clear that this has happened. And what I mean by that, it's a metaphor. The flattening of the mountains being brought down to our level, right? What used to be mysterious and high and noble is now at eye level. This is the age of information. It's done through the internet. It's done through technology. Things are right in front of your face now that used to be intangible. Um, and we've lost respect because we have access. We've lost respect for organization and leadership and the order of things, right? And that there should be any order to anything. We've lost respect for it. Where do we see some examples of this? Okay, here's one clear, obvious one. What about your parents, right? When they get old, you know, you just kind of feel like, wow, this person that had all this power over me when I was a child, like, the earth could shake and they'd be there to stabilize it. Something bad could happen and, they would protect you. And I mean, they had all this knowledge and you just, you looked up to them. Um, we see them as less, just like we see, people that were once intangible to us, celebrities and all that. We actually see them as less. Now with our parents, this is something that, with your parent, you have to remember that this is your parent, okay? Maybe they weren't perfect. Maybe they may have misguided you some, but they did a lot of good for you as well. And a lot of us, our parents did much more good for us than they did bad, okay? We know there were some abusive situations and things like that went on. But you're not to lose respect for your parent. You're not to lose respect for people that were in high positions over you. They looked after you. You owe them something. But, I think the same way that we've become disrespectful or that we think that we've arrived at someone's level who was over us, we're doing that with everything now. This is how we are at work. Someone's giving you a job and you act like you own the place. You act like you're supposed to have the same exact everything that they have and that you can talk a certain way and do all that. Well, you know what? Go do it yourself. What are you doing there, right? Don't be disrespectful and ungrateful to someone that's trying to help you. Even when you get the information, that's my point. And with this leveling or things being brought to eye level for us that were once intangible, we don't really, we haven't done the work, right? It's just the information is just sitting there now, right? So there's something missing. Okay, there's something missing when you have the information, but you don't have the knowledge, right? You don't have the understanding. The information has been given to you, the same high level information that someone who's been very successful, who's built their life on something has been given to you, but somehow you can't implement it. And that's because you don't have knowledge and understanding. And with that, the spirituality rises, right? The emotionality rises. And this is something, I hope I'm coming across clear. This is something that I think we need to have discussions on. This access to information when you're not really developed. What are the adverse reactions to it? But yeah, I mean, you're this rise in emotionality and spirituality that is happening. And how it's affecting the majority of us, right? So, there's a rise in the zodiac right now. There's a rise in all things emotional. There's a rise in feeling our way through life. But a lot of it has to do with this gap that I'm describing. So you can't replace experience and education with emotionality or how you feel. And, what I hear a lot these days is people start sentences with, well, I feel like blah, blah, blah. Or I feel like I don't need to vote because voting doesn't matter. Or I feel like this, or I feel like that. I feel like, I shouldn't have to pay taxes because here I am the one broke, or making the least amount of money. I feel like, people talk like that. And, I'm just kind of like, I mean, what is this based on? You know what I'm saying? But they're living a life where they're leading their life with their feelings and their emotions. And I think that does have something to do with having access to information, but not understanding it, not being able to implement it in a way. But guidance is something that you seek, right? It takes action first, right? You're looking for understanding to gain discernment, right? Where spirituality is something that is felt. Two completely different things that need to be understood as different things. One is fleeing and based on the moment. It's fleeing and based on the moment. And the other only changes with more information. Right? There needs to be a very distinct understanding. There's a confusion with spirituality, religion. What's the difference? Where is the understanding and knowledge in any of this? And it shouldn't be that confusing, but clearly it is. But this is why it's important for us to go back and study the creation for ourselves. One example, a tree has been a tree for centuries, holding on to its logic, and its logic is reliable. It's been reliable. Look at how many things have been created from the tree. Unlike your emotions that are going to be here today and you're going to wake up feeling different tomorrow, right? So it's just baffling to me how, it's like having access to a tree that has ripened fruit, right? But you're going to choose to eat from a tree with unripe fruit. So it's kind of like to choose to follow experienced leadership versus someone that doesn't have any experience, that hasn't reproduced anything. Why would you follow that? And why is that even a question that needs to be asked at this point? Especially when you're a grown-up, an adult. I can understand for children that are learning and all that, they're being led by the emotions and all that. Adults, once you get to a certain age, you have to be educated enough to be able to know what to select, what guidance to follow. Another example is like having a roadmap, like a roadmap to your destination that's been traveled over and over again, right? Why would you choose to just wing it? Why would you choose to just feel your way through it? No, okay? We've all been guilty of this. We've all done it. But when you know better, you do better. So when you have to have a good leader, my point is that to have a good leader is to have a plan, someone with a plan, right? The more effective the plan, the more effective the leader, right? And maybe even exchanging the word leader for planner. Maybe that would help. I don't know. But due to this lack of planning, this lack of leadership that can sustain and elevate, and combined with our primal nature to follow something, what has happened? What has happened? Today we do a lot of pretending. That's what has happened. We do a lot of pretending. And again, this has to do with that gap of having access without understanding. We do a lot of pretending, and we have a lot of hypocritical behavior, even the best of us in this environment. Pretending to be a family. Just because you're married to someone and have kids does not mean that you're acting as a family, right? Pretending to be a community, pretending to be a nation of freedom and justice, and in too many cases, just pretending and having these titles, right? All of these titles that we have, right? That are just titles. They're just ideas. They don't have any definition. And if you really are paying attention to what's happening today, everything is being redefined based on society, not based on the roots of things, not based on history, but just based on emotions. Redefining words and titles based on emotions. This is dangerous. It's confusing. And it's costing people their lives. It's costing people their sanity and their happiness and their mental health. I keep going back to mental health because that seems to be the side effect, the sickness that we're having now as a result of all of this. But where do we see it? What is the plan? What is the plan in the family life, right? It used to be given in the form of religion. We already see what's happening with that. Right. But what are you going to teach your children now that you don't participate in religion, or it's confusing to you, or it doesn't make sense to you, or you reject it? What are you going to teach your children then? You got to have a plan. You can't just drop it and act like you don't need spirituality now. What about race? What's the plan for African Americans? I mean, it's such a broad title to say that we're black. What's the plan for African Americans? At least in the word African American, I hear African. I hear some past. I hear some history that might lead to a plan for the future. But, where's the herd mentality when we need it? Where is it? Where is the herd mentality when we need it? Okay. If you don't have leadership, you don't have a plan, all you have is the herd mentality. Where is it when we need it? But, seriously, I know some people don't want to hear this. I know the word black is back and black is, but just take the emotionality out of it for just one moment, please. We're all different shades of brown. We have all different types of lifestyles and ideas. Are we really thinking that we're all going to get on the same page, or enough of us are going to get on the same page where our mentality just suddenly becomes the same? What would cause that to happen? I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm asking, what's the plan? That's what I'm asking. Okay. If we're going to keep using the word, what's the plan? Right now in Ghana, they have a free citizenship for African Americans. There are a lot of things happening there. I love it. I think it's awesome. I think I'm going to go ahead and get mine, by the way. But that's a plan. It's leading me somewhere. What is the plan? But this is pretending. It's pretending. And I don't think we've thought enough about how damaging the effects of pretending are and how damaging false community life is when it comes to leadership and when it comes to these children that are watching us pretend. It's not, it's like the Santa Claus thing. It's like, you're speaking a language that says you have a community and it says you have a family. But when you look around, you're seeing the opposite. You're seeing the opposite of a family and a community. And these kids, they don't have the same mental health issues that we have, from our past. So why would you want to transfer that on to them? Just be honest, okay? We're trying to have a family. Maybe this is some of the language you can start using. You know what, honey, children, we're trying to have a family here. Okay, we need to create a family. Just because we're together doesn't mean we're a family. What do we need to do to become a family? Okay, community life. You don't have no community. We're trying to create a community. Maybe we're embarrassed to say it. Okay, even the religious communities, maybe they're embarrassed to say, hey, we're trying to create a community, right? Where our hopes and dreams is that we can create a community. When you have children listening, you can't say we have a community, because their idea of community and what they learn at school is not going to match what's going on with you and what's going on with the actual religious communities and what's going on with the actual family. So then there's a disconnect there, and that causes mental dysfunction. Okay, this pretending, in some communities there's fasting, there are these rituals and things. We have Ramadan every year. Now, if that's the cleansing and we're supposed to become a better people, and your children are watching, but they see as soon as it's over, everybody's the same, there hasn't been any progress, nothing's changed, that's called pretending. And again, you can get mad at me, I don't care. It's called pretending. That is pretending, and it's terrible. It is a terrible thing for our children to see. They have this inherent obedient nature. So you're pretending while they're at a time in their life where they're seeking knowledge. What does that do? What does that look like? Right? And then in the home, this is another thing. In the home, competing for leadership and this whole thing that's going on with just the family life and children having to figure out, okay, well, what's the role here? The mom does this, the dad does this. They're constantly, seems like they're always at each other Who's the head of the household? What is this? What is this language? It doesn't match the reality. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't match the reality. One thing I want to clear up during this talk is that we like to say the home is a microcosm of the community. There is truth to that, but it is not the same thing. Family life is something that happens on the inside. This is where we're talking about leadership and obedience. On the inside is different from leadership and obedience on the outside. Community life happens on the outside. The inside environment, it's similar, but it is not like the outside environment, right? What is inside is not like what's outside. Okay, this is something that seems very basic, but we're confused about it. And this is important for raising children and for teaching obedience. There's just so many examples that we could set here if we understood this for our children, because they're absorbing everything, they're witnessing everything. There's no filter there for them. So what happens when this obedient nature that they have sees material things being organized and herded on the outside, but not the spiritual things or what's going on the inside, right? The outside appears to have order and organization. The inside is a mess, right? Constantly arguing, fighting, the moods in the house, the emotional uncertainty, the instability. The things on the inside are not being brought together in unity, and there's no one's on the same page. This creates a superficial human being. It creates a superficial life, a life of materialism and terrible spiritual health. So, you could say it's kind of like being herded materially, but not spiritually. What happens when there's no spiritual protector? We're seeing it today. Where do we see it today? The spiritual predators attack. You didn't know there was such thing as spiritual predator? Well, what do you call internal disorders like anxiety and depression, right? These are spiritual predators. And this is us. This depression and anxiety pandemic that we're going to, and these attacks that happen due to the lack of the group spirit, the lack of unity, right? What is unseen emotional, these unseen things that we're not paying attention to, and we're being attacked from the inside by these different types of diseases. And this is killing people. I mean, I'm emphasizing it because I don't think we're taking it seriously enough. I just don't think we're taking it seriously enough. It's sad. So what's going on with your spiritual health? That's what I'm asking. What are you doing to nurture your spiritual health? Are you going to listen to anyone? Are you going to go see somebody? And then when we do see the group spirit, it's never anything good. You see January 6th. This is a group spirit that arose. When do we get to see this group spirit, this resurgence of a community that's doing the right things, that has, beautiful discussions and beautiful family life, and this, where's that group spirit arising? It seems like it's always hate when there is a group spirit that arises. I don't know, the way that life is, it's kind of like you go through these softening and hardening. How can I express this? Like when we were talking about children, they have this soft nature, right? And it's a time when, they're vulnerable to listening, to obedience, to being molded and shaped. Then there's this teen year that comes when they become teenagers, and they become hard, and you can't reach them, right? Then life beats them up and they become soft again, right? They become to a place where, when life kicks your butt enough, you'll soften up. So then you're open to listening again. And then as you get up in age, you become hard. Like, a lot of these natural things like losing your hearing and these signs that the body gives of the body aging and all that have a spiritual correlation as well. Not being able to hear anymore, being stern and stubborn, these things like that. So maybe if we could, pay attention to these soft times in our life where we're reachable and moldable and shapeable. And I'm sure, just in terms of people that, sell products and businesses and things, I'm sure they know the science behind this and that they concentrate on the soft nature or the soft, when people are soft and what ages and things and, being able to, shape and mold us to do what they want. But we have the same ability to pay attention to those same things and, work from an internal standpoint on our children, on each other, right? Instead of taking advantage of each other when we're vulnerable or soft, use it as a time and an opportunity to be a good influence, maybe, But that's what we would have to do. And I'm just going to be honest. At this point in my life, as a teacher, I went through this whole thing of, who's my audience going to be? Who do I want to influence? Who do I want to teach? And when I paid attention to this whole hardening and softening in terms of influence and the journey that man goes through as we progress in age, I'm just like, I don't want to talk to no hard-headed people. That's another reason why I deal with animals. I think animals and plants and nature, I think it attracts a certain mindset and eliminates others. But, I don't want to I don't even want anybody, I don't want to deal with anyone who doesn't listen and is not open to being educated or knowledge or humanity or doing what is right. I'm just not interested anymore. There's this, I get into the nursery rhymes and things like that because they're so interesting to me. But this one in particular, Mary had a little lamb. And, when you understand the logic behind it and you listen to the nursery rhyme, she's saying that, Mary had a little lamb and they followed her to school one day. If you know anything about Mary, then she was this body of logic, just information and just logic. And you've got to have respect for Mary if you know anything about this and about her and the information that she knew. But these lambs, this obedient nature, this obedient nature found in the human being is what was able to follow her and understand her and respect her. This wasn't everybody, so it's kind of a sign to me that only a certain nature of human being or a certain type of person is going to benefit from this kind of information. And it's going to benefit enough to build community life, right? It's going to benefit enough to have family life, and everybody else will just have to deal with the hell of what's going on here in society. So I want to thank you for listening. Be sure to share and subscribe to my channel. Peace and blessings. Get ready for this next episode that's going to be coming up and stay tuned. Thank you so much. Until next time.